Ebola is in the news. It is a plague that is striking Liberia and West Africa. Thousands are dying from a virus that just seems that once you come in contact with it, almost everyone dies. And it's one of those things that seems should get us to maybe reconsider how safe we are even here in the West. Are we really safe? I was reading about the thousands who have died. I was reading that even America is starting to respond to that by sending troops over to help build different medical facilities to help deal with the crisis that's happening in West Africa right now. And yet among all that, I read an interesting article from an individual who made the point to say that this disease won't come to the West and won't affect us. It made me step back for a moment and think about even the presumptuousness of that kind of a comment. You think about even our past, and not even all that far back in the past. We don't have to look to see that there are diseases that have affected the entire world. If you go back less than 100 years ago, there was an epidemic worldwide flu virus that struck the world. We don't even think about that much or don't even hear about it that much anymore. And yet, believe it or not, 500,000 Americans died from that flu virus. In fact, the statistics around the world go upwards of 100 million people around the world died from that 1918 flu virus. Is it possible that this Ebola virus could get away from West Africa and infect the world? Could it be that we're just a plane flight away from that disease being on the steps of the West? I think we have to consider that. In fact, Bible prophecy, when you look at the future and what Jesus Christ himself predicted, I think it should cause us to step back and consider. Notice what he said in Matthew chapter 24. We'll write it down here. Matthew 24 deals with prophecy, end-time prophecy, and Christ said, verse 7 of Matthew 24, "Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in various places." You know, this concept of pestilence or disease is one that Christ foretold would be coming about. Things like the 1918 flu epidemic aren't out of the question. Christ said it was going to happen. Could that be Ebola? Could that be almost any number of other deadly diseases or bugs that are out there? Could be. What if Ebola became airborne and wasn't just communicated by touch, by that personal contact? What would change the whole story if that became the real issue? And so what Christ prophesied, is that possible? I believe that it is. In fact, a little bit later in chapter 24, verse 21, he says, "There will be such great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor shall ever be." In fact, he even points to the extent of the disaster of this time of tribulation, and he says, "Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved alive. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened." You see, things like this should be a reminder to each of us. We need to get our spiritual house in order. These things could be on our doorstep. In fact, there is coming a time that they will be on our doorstep. So do we take to heart the warning that Christ gave and that we put our lives in order? We throw ourselves on the grace and mercy of God and we straighten up our spiritual life so that we can face Jesus Christ when he returns. A stark warning, but let's take it to heart. That's BT Daily. We'll see you next time.